heroin addicts who've taken an overdose is now available throughout Scotland. The drug's called Naloxone, and the Scottish Government say the initiative is the first of its kind in the world and will help save lives. Well, let's speak to Stephen Malloy from the Scottish Drugs Forum, who's been working on the rollout of drug work then.
Well, firstly, just to correct one of the points that was made there, while this is one of the most comprehensive and indeed world-leading programmes available across the globe, Naloxone community distribution has been around for well over a decade. This is not a new thing in terms of supplying.
So we know it works. And we know it works
very strong evidence.
But this is a big rollout.
This is a national rollout. It's multifaceted and provides a series of opportunities within communities that people who use opiate drugs, heroin users, can access this medication. So it's a very comprehensive programme, and I guess that's what makes it world leading. In terms of what this medication is, naloxone is technically called an opioid antagonist. In other words, it reverses the effects of opiate-based drugs, medications and the likes. And to explain a little further, the majority of drugs-related deaths or overdoses that we see in Scotland unfortunately involve a combination of substances, usually alcohol, benzodiazepines like Valium, and heroin and methadone. Now, heroin and methadone are two opiate drugs, of course. Naloxone, when it finds its way into an individual's bloodstream, travels up to the brain and temporarily reverses the effects of those drugs. So these drugs, and in particular heroin and methadone, can reduce a person's respiratory rate, how well they breathe. Naloxone has the power, if you like, to reverse those effects and save lives, as you put it. Yeah.
So how do addicts get a hold of it on this programme?
Okay, well, people who use drugs, and in particular heroin or are being prescribed methadone, should be proactively engaged around this. We have an excellent history in Scotland of offering as many services as possible, I suppose, to people to look at ways to help them preserve their lives or enhance their lives. Any individual who feels that they might be at risk, or perhaps if a service thinks an individual might be at risk of a future opiate-related overdose, should be engaged and offered a supply. So someone could access a supply via needle exchange, maybe via a community addiction team, an addiction service in a locality. Any service that's in contact with people at risk will have information available to tell that person where they could get themselves a supply in naloxone.
The danger would be, though, isn't it, that users see it as a safety net, and that it would allow them to become quite cavalier with the doses of opiates that they're taking.
It's a really interesting kind of hypothesis, and it's circulated for a number of years. For as long as there's been community programmes, there's been this idea that if we supply naloxone, does that mean that people will increase their drug use or take bigger risks? And the truth is, through the length of all these programmes, there's never been one shred of evidence to support that hypothesis. And sometimes during training, we equate it to, a seatbelt in a car. Putting a seatbelt on doesn't prevent you from crashing. It just reduces the chance of fatality should you crash. Ultimately, whether you crash or not is determined by your behaviour and a range of other factors. And that's exactly the same for accidental opiate-related overdose.
But of course, there's money involved here. Do you think the public will actually see this as money well spent?
I would sincerely hope so. This is a very, very inexpensive medication. We're looking at just over £10 per kit. So it's a very inexpensive medication. There shouldn't be a need for continual resupply. It should be a question of maybe a supply once or twice over the course of a few years, particularly if it's used. And the investment made by the Scottish Government, SDF, absolutely welcomes. And we're entirely aware that many services in Scotland, community groups, and in particular family groups, the people who this matters to most, are hugely supportive of this investment.
Okay. Thanks very much for joining us.
Very welcome, thank you.
Stephen Malloy from the Scottish Drugs Forum.
Headlines, the Prime Minister has been